We now turn to aspects of human reproduction, first by comparing egg and sperm production amongst birds and humans, then looking at hormonal control of the cycles within a female, and finally looking at some of the medical interventions to reproduction. Of the figures you see on this slide, the far right shows an X-ray of a fetus in red superimposed over the maternal skeleton in blue. In the center, that's a photo of a limb bud forming in a human fetus, and you can see that there's yet to occur apoptosis among the cells that will differentiate the individual digits of the hand. On the far left are clusters of sperm moving through the female reproductive tract, in this case trying to gain access to the uterus by moving through the cervix at the top of the vagina. To begin, we'll look at a general overview of reproductive anatomy among animals and then focus on humans. Gonads is a term that generally refers to reproductive structures in males or females. The spermatheca refers to a storage unit within females that holds sperm, sometimes for up to a year in some species. The cloaca is a term that refers to an opening through which both excretory, so digestive material, as well as reproductive material can exit the individual. We've already introduced the terms gametogenesis with the focus on both spermatogenesis and oogenesis in an earlier lecture, and we'll look at that again with specifics to humans. There are two examples of other reproductive systems, the honeybee above and a hermaphroditic planarian below. In the male honeybee, the sperm form in testes. They pass through the vas deferens, in which they reach and are stored in the seminal vesicles. Upon ejaculation, the accessory gland contributes fluid to facilitate the process. In the female honeybee, the eggs are developing in the ovaries, pass through the oviducts to the vagina. The accessory glands add protective secretions to the eggs in the vagina. Upon mating, the sperm can be stored in the spermatheca for up to a year in some species. In flatworms, both the male and female systems are present, and they open to the exterior through a single pore called the genital pore, which is towards the top of this diagram. The sperm are made in the testes down to the bottom of this diagram, and they travel along the numbered path and ejaculate into the female system of another individual, not the same individual. Sperm then travel through the uterus to the seminal receptacle, where they remain until they fertilize an egg that's passed from the ovary to the oviduct. Eggs are coated with yolk in a shell by the yolk gland and then exit the individual through the uterus. Look at the reproductive anatomy of birds. For most birds, the females have just one ovary. When the egg is produced, fertilization occurs immediately if sperm are present. As the egg travels through the oviduct, egg white is added, the outer membranes are added, and essentially it's fully built by the time it reaches the vagina. Most birds during copulation juxtapose an extroverted cloaca during copulation. But there are a couple of notable exceptions, particularly amongst waterfowl. And here there is sexual selection for very long penises because of the mating is occurring in the water. In one case, in the Argentine lake duck, the researchers have documented a 20-centimeter long penis, which is half the length of the adult body and is covered with dense spines. Human reproduction for the remainder of this slideshow. Together, this table combines some of the similarities and differences in gametogenesis of humans. First, immature eggs almost completely form during embryonic development of the female, whereas sperm production occurs from adolescence through adulthood in males. In oogenesis, only one of the four meiotic products develops into a mature gamete, whereas in spermatogenesis, all four meiotic products are developing into gametes. The process of maturation is quite different. Amongst females, several follicles are recruited to mature every month, but only one completes it in approximately a cycle of 28 days. Amongst males, over 200 million sperm are produced daily, and that's approximately equal to the amount released in one ejaculate quantity. Older sperm are destroyed and recycled by the body or eliminated in urine. Upon release, the sperm takes about 10 hours to travel to the fallopian tube within a female reproductive tract. Only 1% of the original quantity reached the uterus, and only a smaller portion of that 1% actually reached the fallopian tube. Now, amongst female egg production, a 6-month-old fetus has 7 million oocytes, but by birth, this number has already been reduced to 800,000. And by the time the female begins puberty, she generally only has 250,000 eggs. But that's still plenty because only approximately 500 are released during any female's lifetime. The maturation process for a single ovum or egg takes up to 3 months from when the follicle is stimulated to begin maturation and when it's released. Some recent research is beginning to suggest that mammals may be capable of producing eggs beyond embryonic development. This research is in mice, where they found that there are stem cells within the ovaries that are capable of producing active oocytes in adult mice. That research is ongoing to determine if anything similar occurs in humans. As for you to map out the pathway of sperm as it travels through the mammalian system and exits the male body. In the process, additional fluid is added to the ejaculate quantity from 5 accessory glands. The 2 seminal vesicles produce fructose and prostaglandins. The prostate gland produces an antibiotic material, perhaps to reduce male urinary tract infections, and citric acid, which is a nutrient to stimulate motility in the sperm. The 2 bulbourethral glands produce alkaline mucus, which neutralizes the urine in the urethra and the acidic environment in the vagina and lubricates the entire pathway. Spermatogenesis begins in the seminiferous tubules within the testes. Right is a cross-section of a seminiferous tubule with the outer membrane to the left of this diagram. Here we see the spermatogonium forming primary spermatocytes via mitosis and then secondary spermatocytes again via mitosis. Meiosis begins from the secondary spermatocytes and produces 4 immature sperm called spermatotids. Those spermatotids mature within the seminiferous tubules and are released to the epididymis for storage. There are additional cells within the seminiferous tubules called Sertoli cells. These are in orange in this particular diagram, and they provide nutrients to the maturing spermatotids. That an unfertilized mammalian egg follows from its origin to its exit from the body. Where does fertilization occur within the female? Ovaries contain oocytes, very similar to the spermatocytes that we just looked at, that are involved in producing the ovum. The ovulation refers to the release of this ovum from the ovary. What's of note is that the remaining cells of that particular ovum are referred to as the follicle. The follicle persists within the ovary as a hormone-synthesizing group of cells known as the corpus luteum. Now, the stem cells in the ovary divide, just like in the seminiferous tubules, by mitosis to form the oogonium, and then meiosis begins during embryonic development. In embryonic development, this process is arrested in an early stage of prophase 1, which is during meiosis 1. Hormone, or FSH, is produced in the brain and acts upon the ovary. The ovary synthesizes estradiol, which helps to stimulate the maturation of the follicles. Again, the follicles is a group of cells that supports and surrounds each individual ovum. Typically, this causes one of the ovums to fully mature and complete meiosis 1 and begin meiosis 2. But again, this process is arrested in a stage within meiosis 2 known as metaphase 2. This produces an ovum that is released from the ovary during ovulation. That ovum passes through the fallopian tubes where it can be fertilized, and once fertilized, it does complete the remaining steps of meiosis. General overview of the hormonal control of reproductive behavior, and we'll look even more closely when we get to the unit with hormones. The female cycles rely on hormonal cues that are responsible for creating 3 different phases: the menstrual cycle, which is when the uterine lining is shed from the female; the follicular cycle, which is where a follicle is maturing within the ovary; and the luteal cycle, which is where the corpus luteum is synthesizing hormones, but if fertilization does not occur, it degenerates and the cycle repeats. An egg is released during this process approximately every 24 to 36 days. Ovarian and pituitary hormones that are involved in creating the menstrual cycle. First, the ovarian hormones. The ovaries produce estradiol and progesterone. The presence of both of these maintains the uterine lining, but if a fertilized egg is not present and contributing to hormonal products, then the corpus luteum degenerates and ceases production of progesterone. This contributes to the onset of menstruation and the shedding of the uterine lining. Now, if a fertilized egg is present, it produces a hormone called HCG, or human chorionic gonadotropin. This mimics the effects of progesterone and leads to many subsequent changes in the female body to support pregnancy. Amongst the pituitary hormones, the pituitary responds to growing levels of estradiol in the body and produces a spike of FSH and LH that results in ovulation from the ovary. Fetus can be divided into 3 stages to conception. The first is the production of egg and sperm. The second considers the actual union of the egg and the sperm within the female reproductive tract. And the third is the process of implantation of the fertilized egg into the uterine tissue. Consider all of the medical interventions that you know of that promote or prevent pregnancy in humans. Take some time to sort them into which of these 3 stages they best fit, and we'll discuss further in class.